The fluorescent lights hummed a low, constant drone, a sound so utterly, perfectly mundane that Johnny Blaze often found himself fixated on it. He sat at a polished oak desk, not the scarred, leather-clad seat of a roaring motorcycle, but a solid, unassuming block of wood in an unassuming office. Before him, a spreadsheet glowed, rows and columns of numbers, a stark contrast to the blazing inferno that often consumed his mind. This was his life now, or at least his attempt at one. Johnny Blaze, the Ghost Rider, supernatural avenger, spirit of vengeance, was an accountant. It was a quiet rebellion, this life he'd carved out for himself. After what felt like an eternity battling demons, both external and internal, the relentless grind of his cursed existence had worn him down. He yearned for quiet, for predictability, for a world where the biggest threat was an audit, not an elder god. And so he'd found himself drawn to the most mundane profession he could imagine: accounting, the antithesis of hellfire. He'd started with little more than a cheap suit, a borrowed tie, and a desperate hope. His past, shrouded in carefully constructed half-truths, was a phantom limb he constantly tried to ignore. He'd traded the roar of the road for the soft click of a keyboard, the screams of the damned for the hushed whispers of office gossip. His days were filled with debits and credits, balance sheets and tax codes. He learned to nod at water cooler conversations about weekend plans and to feign interest in quarterly reports. It was an elaborate performance, a slow, painstaking exercise in pretending to be ordinary. There were moments, of course, when the pretense faltered. A sudden, unexpected flicker of light outside the window might momentarily trick his eyes into seeing a fiery inferno. The sharp clang of a dropped coffee mug could echo like the shattering of chains. He'd catch his reflection in the dark office window at night, and for a fleeting second, he'd see not Johnny Blaze, mild-mannered accountant, but the skeletal visage wreathed in spectral flames. These were the moments that reminded him the curse wasn't truly gone. It was merely dormant, a sleeping beast tethered by a thread of his own desperate will. He tried to find a quiet satisfaction in the meticulous work. There was a certain logic to numbers, a predictable order that his life had always lacked. He found himself almost enjoying the process of untangling complex financial knots, bringing order to chaos, however small. It was a different kind of justice, perhaps, making sure the numbers added up, ensuring fairness in a world that so often felt unbalanced. He even managed a polite smile or two for his colleagues, small victories in the grand battle for his soul. But the quiet life, he soon discovered, wasn't a cure for the internal torment. It was merely a different kind of prison. The absence of external threats left him with ample time to confront the internal ones. The memories, once drowned out by the roar of his motorcycle and the cries of the damned, now surfaced with unnerving clarity in the quiet of his office. The faces of those he'd failed, the deals he'd made, the price he'd paid for vengeance, they haunted his spreadsheets. One afternoon, a particularly aggressive client, frustrated by a tax discrepancy, began to shout, his face growing red with anger. Johnny felt a familiar tremor deep within him. The primal urge to respond with force, to unleash the hellfire that lay just beneath his skin, surged. His hands clenched beneath the desk, his knuckles white. He closed his eyes for a brief moment, focusing on the cheap carpet beneath his sensible shoes, on the scent of stale coffee in the air. He reminded himself where he was, who he was trying to be. When he opened his eyes, he offered a calm, steady explanation, his voice even, his face impassive. The client, taken aback by his quiet resolve, eventually subsided. It was a victory, certainly, but it felt hollow. He had suppressed the demon, but at what cost? He felt like he was constantly holding his breath. Ultimately, the quiet life of an accountant couldn't hold the spirit of vengeance at bay indefinitely. Johnny Blaze's attempt at normalcy wasn't a failure in the sense that he couldn't perform the job. He was, by all accounts, a competent and unremarkable employee. The failure was in the fundamental incompatibility of the man and the mask. He yearned for peace, but peace, for Johnny, wasn't the absence of conflict, it was the acceptance of his true nature, however monstrous it might seem. His time as an accountant was brief, a poignant chapter in a life defined by extraordinary circumstances. It was an essential pause, a moment for reflection, a desperate, valiant attempt to choose a different path. But some paths, he learned, are simply inherent to who you are. The hum of the fluorescent lights, the quiet click of the keyboard, the neatly organized spreadsheets, they offered a stark contrast, a brief respite, but never a true escape. Johnny Blaze couldn't outrun the rider within, nor could he outrun his destiny. And perhaps, deep down, he understood that he never truly wanted to. The accountant's desk eventually gave way to the roaring engine once more, the ledger replaced by the heavy chains, but with a renewed understanding, a quiet resignation, and perhaps a deeper, more profound acceptance of the accountant who rode hell. We all, in our own ways, seek normalcy, a quiet harbor from the storms of life. Johnny Blaze's journey as an accountant reminds us that sometimes finding peace isn't about escaping who we are, but embracing it, even if that embrace involves hellfire. What do you think about Johnny's attempt at a normal life? Have you ever tried to run from a part of yourself? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, please consider subscribing for more tales of extraordinary lives.